Welcome back. In this video, we're starting Chapter 4, Images. But before we jump into images, I want to cover exactly what the different types of images are. With images, you have different image types. If you've ever dealt with an image on your computer, chances are you've dealt with the image type itself, whether it's a JPEG, a GIF, or a GIF, depending on how you pronounce it, a PNG, or a fourth type, depending on what you've dealt with. Well, you may have seen these image types, but you may not know exactly what the difference is, at least on a basic level, between the 3 or 4 of them, depending on how many you deal with. To give a brief example of the comparison of the top 3, with the JPEG or JPG, you have the best compression but smallest size. It is a lossy value, which means that it's going to be compressing and actually merging a few of the colors in the image to make sure it gives you the smallest file size. It is the lowest to worst quality depending on how far you compress it. It can have good quality, but based on that, it's usually low to the worst. Does not support transparency, and well, there's not much other in the category. A GIF or a GIF, again depending on where and how you pronounce it. The compression size is medium to best. It has good quality, it's a little jagged around the edges. It does support transparency if the alpha layer is enabled. And in other, we have animation capabilities, dithering, I'll get to that in just a minute, and a maximum of 256 colors. It doesn't allow for the most color range that JPEGs allow, but for animation and transparency, it's a good compromise. Now, PNG, or Portable Network Graphics. These are large, but they also have lossless quality, which means that every single pixel in the image is saved and represented, therefore it has a high and big file size. It does have the best quality because the items are being recreated pixel by pixel. It does allow for transparency, and unlike JPEGs and GIFs, or GIFs, it allows for 16 million colors to be chosen from, which means that the color or the image you have will be the brightest it can be. On top of that, if you've ever seen what's called an SVG or Scalable Vector Graphic, this has increased in popularity over the past couple of years, and a lot of browsers do support the creation and production of SVGs. The size is small to medium depending on what you're doing with it. It is the best quality because it can be scaled to pretty much any size. Every time that you scale it up or down, it will be recompiled, more or less, to an image that is best for your quality. It does support transparency, but not a lot of people know about SVGs. They usually prefer JPEGs for the smallest file size. If you're a little confused, don't worry, we'll get to the comparison in just a minute. Let's talk about dithering. If you've ever seen an image up close, or you've seen the fine details of an image, you notice that the image itself is not just an image, it's actually made up of a bunch of pixels that are on the image itself. So it actually creates an image once all these pixels are gathered together. Once you decrease in quality, the dithering itself does increase, but that does mean you lose a bit of quality in the image. It actually merges a few of the pixels together to save on space and not having to worry about the size. So the quality of the image does go down drastically once you start increasing the dithering. So the image on the far left is a lot better than the image on the far right, but the image on the far right has a lot less file size, but that's because the dithering is so high. Other file types include BMP or bitmaps. This is the largest file format, and please never use this on the web. Some of the images that are brought from cameras can be anywhere from 4 to 5 megabytes, and if you ever try to load a 5 megabyte file on the web, it takes forever, even with the fastest of speeds. PSD or the Photoshop file format can be useful, but not really that useful on the web. A RAW file is straight from DSLR cameras. It is the highest quality, but also the highest size. Not a lot of browsers know how to process a RAW file. And lastly, we have the WebP. It's from Google. It's sort of brand new, probably about 10 years old. It has a great file size because it does have the smallest file size with the biggest quality, but nowadays, at least in 2018, the browser support is hit and miss. Some browsers support it, some don't. A lot of the more modern ones like Google and Firefox support it, but Internet Explorer and Edge are still kind of iffy about it. So if you had to choose between any of these file types, I would say go with JPEG, GIF or GIF, and PNG. That would give you probably 99% of the browser support out there. Now let's compare file types. Take a look at this nice bright image from the Netherlands. If you actually compare it as far as the JPEG, you can see that the close-up is not the greatest quality, but it gives you what you want for the smallest file size. If you were to look at it as a GIF, you can see that the dithering is there again, where the pixels are actually taken out and merged into some areas to create the lowest file size. Again, it only has a palette of 256 colors versus the JPEG. For any of us that have been on the internet the past, say, 18 years, you also know that GIFs have one great advantage, and that is their animation. If you've been anywhere on the internet, chances are you've seen one of these in your email, on a web page, on Facebook. Chances are you've seen a GIF without even knowing it because the animation is there. Lastly, the PNG. The PNG has a great quality when it comes to the full image. Once you get closer into it, it does sort of lose a little quality, but the overall image itself is still great. Lastly, the SVG, Scalar Vector Graphic. Let's take a look at this picture of a butterfly. As you can see, it's nice, crisp, and clean. Well, again, one of the advantages of SVG is that it can be zoomed and scaled to any size. So if we take a look and zoom in, you can see the quality is degraded only about maybe 1%. The rest is actually quite good, and you can scale this to any size you want and it'll still be very high quality. Let's take a look at the four file types that I just talked about side by side. JPEG, of course, has the smallest file size but no transparency. GIF works with the somewhat smallest file size. If you take a look, it actually does have a bit of the rough edginess around the wings of this butterfly. That's okay-ish. PNG has the highest file size of 205 kilobytes, and SVG has the medium range but has the best quality. If you were to compare these on a website, the JPEG of course would load first, then the GIF, then the SVG, then the PNG. PNG of course gives you the same quality, highest file size. Alright, enough with the technical talk, let's move on with part 2 and the legality of images.